pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, Atlantis.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight downside, SCE off. Bring in, SCE off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. We have a live interview with the two newest private customers for a Starship flight around the moon for an afternoon interview with us, Akiko and Tito. Thank you so much for joining the NSF stream. How are you both doing today?
Good, thank
Very
you.
good.
Awesome. My name is Thomas Burkhart, News Director for NASA Spaceflight, also joined by Chris Gebhardt, Assistant Managing Editor of NASA Spaceflight. Chris, thanks for hopping on.
My absolute pleasure.
And we have got these two for a live interview here. We've got a bunch of questions that we already know we want to ask, but we're also doing live interview questions from the chat. So if you've got questions to ask Dennis and Akiko, please tag us at NASA Spaceflight in chat. We're going to start bringing those in and answer as many as we can. But very excited to talk to the Titos today about becoming the newest private customers to take a Starship, SpaceX Starship, around the moon and back to Earth. One of a couple of private flights that SpaceX has racked up now. And Chris, why don't we dive into learning all about this new mission?
Indeed, and Akiko and Dennis, thank you so much for the time to do this. And you both have pretty amazing backgrounds leading up to this moment. So for both of you, can you talk about your backgrounds in your professional backgrounds so far?
Okay, I'll start since my background's a little longer. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, and I was 17 years old at that time. And of course, I was fascinated by the fact that that was the beginning of spaceflight. And I started a university the next year, and I ended up enrolling in aeronautics and astronautics. And I got my degree in 62 at the time when humans were starting to fly in space. And at that age, after graduation, I said, someday I want to go to space. I was just fascinated by space. And I ended up getting a master's degree. And in 1964, I moved out to California and joined the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And much to my surprise, they offered me the responsibility for the trajectory of Mariner 4. And I was 23 years old, and it was kind of an amazing position. But I've since found out that right now, 80% of SpaceX employees are in their 20s. So I guess it's not as unusual to start out your career with responsibilities that young. And I ended up being involved again in the Mariner 4 program, which led to the first close-up pictures of Mars. And before that, we had no idea what Mars looked like. And the pictures came back and it looked like the moon. It was lots of craters. So there weren't going to be canals and Martians and all the things that we had absolutely no idea what was on the surface. So I ended up working on a Venus mission and then a Mars orbiter mission, and then decided to change careers and work in finance. That did not end my interest in space. And fast forward, in 2001, I had the opportunity to fly to the space station. Spent 8 days in space, and it was the most phenomenal experience anyone could imagine. And here we are doing it again. And this is even more beyond imagination of what it will be like to circle the moon.
Akiko, you want to tell us a little bit about your aviation background and the background that has led you to this flight?
Sure. So I graduated college in Tokyo, Japan, like 88, and start working in a banking system. I was a system engineer developing a banking system in Tokyo, and I moved to New York, start working in a money broker in a Wall Street. And then I moved to California, and then I became a real estate investor. And I started flying about 4 years ago, starting with the 172, and I got the private license, instrument rating, and mother engine rating, and jet rating, and then I got commercial rating. So I fly solo now, a jet, 200 hours now, the solo flight, the jet. And I met Dennis actually a long time ago, and I started listening his, space story, like day and day. I was fascinated about going to space, and got me so interested in the space trip. And then here we are, and we're going to the moon together. So I'm so happy about it.
So what was it that inspired you both to want to do this, to want to take this trip around the moon?
Well, it's an interesting story. It's something I've been thinking about off and on for the last 21 years, since my trip to the ISS. And there was no real way of doing it. And I've been following SpaceX development, but I just didn't think there would be an opportunity to go to the moon until recently with my flight. And we have a friend that knows SpaceX quite well, and she invited us to tour the SpaceX facility here in Hawthorne. And we ended up getting the tour and sitting down, and then, much to my surprise, SpaceX people brought up the idea of would we be interested in having another flight to the space station, or a free flight. And I said, no, I'm not interested in that. But I am interested in going to the moon. And then I looked at Akiko, who was sitting next to me, and we just looked at each other's eyes, and I nodded, and she nodded, and we, yeah, are you interested? Yeah. And that's the way it happened. And we started serious discussions from that point on. That was 14 months ago.
So sort of stemming from that, one thing that struck me by the announcement was both of your backgrounds are very different from some of the other, flyers that we've seen, but it's more akin to kind of a Jared Isaacman style. You both understand these systems, you understand flight, you understand the engineering elements behind it. So how is that going to help contribute to what Starship is ultimately trying to do, and what SpaceX is ultimately trying to do, with not just making humanity multiplanetary, but opening that access for people?
Well, if I go back to my space flight 21 years ago, I mean, there was a huge amount of coverage, around the world. I was really surprised that there would be so much interest in that flight. And over the last 20 or so years, people would come up to me and ask me questions about the space flight, and really commend me for taking that risk, and sitting on top of a 700,000 pounds of high explosive, and so on. But I really knew how inspirational that flight was. And this flight, given the fact that we're older, that we're married, is actually a whole new range of activities, spaceflight wise, that we hope will really inspire people later on, particularly as the price comes down, to enjoy spaceflight. It is, I think, the most fun thing you can do is be floating weightless and, you know, looking out at space, looking out at the Earth. I think about it every day, and thought about it every day since I made the flight 21 years ago. And Akiko and I, even before this idea came up at SpaceX, you know, would talk about spaceflight and how inspirational it was.
And Thomas, I think we've got some viewer questions too to loop
Yeah, I
in
would
as
love
well.
to.
Yeah.
I'll start bringing those in for sure. Let's see. First one is asking about the Starship vehicle that you'll fly on. It's been a tradition in human space flight, especially here in the United States, for the first crew gets to name their own vehicle. So chat wants to know if either of you have given any thought to naming your Starship.
Well, I don't think it's going to be up to us to name it. We have obviously thought of a name, but I don't want to share it at this point and
Okay.
SpaceX for making that decision.
All right. Well, we'll have to come back to that closer to flight then.
But you can think of some obvious. We've been married 2 years, and we haven't gone on a honeymoon yet, so because of COVID. But
All right.
I don't know. I really can't think of any name for this mission.
Sounds good. We'll come back to that then. Bringing in another question. What are both of your thoughts about Starship testing and the development that you, as you said, you've been following for a few years now?
Let Akiko comment on that.
Well, I mean, we've been watching all the testing stuff, and you know, I trust SpaceX. So you know, whatever happens, and they fix it, and so, you know, we're gonna test over and over and over 100 times, and by the time when we go, like, hopefully, like, no worry, and you know, everything is set to go, and we just hoping to, you know, get everything to get together pretty soon, and yeah, we really trust SpaceX team.
It's been cool to be able to see the testing program, you know, kind of live as it happens, whether it's the hop tests or the different fueling tests and all the different things that we've seen happen in Starbase via some of these cameras. Be able to see that kind of more open than a lot of rocket programs has been in the past, and has that affected your?
Well, it has, and you know, when you go on a flight like this, I mean, having done it, you have to realize there is risk. This is not, you know, getting on an airliner and you know, flying to New York. So you have to accept the risk, and you don't want to take any unnecessary risks. And you know, I had a discussion, you know, right after my flight 21 years ago with the Russians, and they proposed that you know, we do a circumlunar flight, but I was not comfortable with the rocket that they were using in the upper stage, and I just felt it would be too risky. But having watched SpaceX develop, and you just, you know, watch that there were failures, and these failures led to debugging, you know, the process. And, you know, if you develop software, you know, you want to run it a lot and get all the bugs out of it. And there will be bugs, and there will be failures before there are humans on board. And we like that kind of testing. And we see how reliable, the Falcon 9 is, and also the Falcon Heavy. So we have a lot of confidence in SpaceX that they're going to provide even greater safety than I was looking for when I first flew.
So sort of to that, as people who have bought 2 seats on this flight, what is your insight? Because you both have engineering backgrounds to an extent here. So what is your insight into the development process? Are you able to pull from your past experiences to talk with the teams about how some of those internal elements to the ship's design are progressing?
Yes. In fact, it was interesting that, again, we had our first meeting here about 14 months ago, where we started discussing the orbital mission. And it turned out that it was the same day that the Inspiration 4 crew came to start their training. And we ended up spending an hour with them. And they had a lot of questions for me about, my space flight. And I looked at them and I said, well, the biggest thing you have to worry about is the toilet. And they're kind of looking at me, really? And the rest of that story.
Oh man, that's funny.
And to you, Akiko, what's one of your main goals for this, right? Not just the experience, but what is it that you hope that you'll be able to contribute to this program and to humanity's steps off of our home planet?
Yes. So when we start thinking about this trip, that I know that Elon's focusing on the Mars mission. So I'm thinking that could be a part of the history, right? To go to the moon in the future. The Mars in the future. So the going to the moon, go around the moon, it could be really, the first step towards that direction. So, we can contribute for that, I'm hoping. And then another thing is that, Dennis is 82 years old. I'm 57, and we're not that young anymore. But, we can inspire people, right? Age doesn't matter. It's just open for anybody if you healthy and focus on what they want. So I'm really focusing on inspiring people, and especially women. No woman went to the moon yet. So I'm the first woman to be announced to go to the moon. So I wish, flying the same thing, 5%, the woman pilot only 5%. So I just want to inspire women, and doesn't matter, women, gender or race. And I just want to inspire people, I hope.
I've got some more viewer questions to bring in here, and we mentioned earlier that you met the Inspiration 4 crew when they were starting their training, and chat wants to know if there's been any discussions between you two and SpaceX about the training that you two will be undergoing before this flight occurs.
Well, not yet. I followed some of the training that Inspiration 4 was going through, and it's going to be challenging. And the training I went through 20 years ago was also challenging, but we've talked about it, and they're probably going to make us climb Mount Everest or something challenging. Well, at least some mountain, but we're ready for it.
All right, well, maybe we'll hear more on that closer to the flight as well, but obviously you've got some time there. Another question asking kind of about the flight profile that you and SpaceX have looked at. You mentioned that this conversation actually started from the idea of flying on, Dragon to low Earth orbit. And he said, no, we're more interested in the moon. Is this mission going to be a Starship end-to-end flight, or are you expecting there to be some Dragon involvement in order to, rendezvous with Starship or something like that? Any discussions about what those logistics are going to look like?
I think I can give you an idea. It will not involve Dragon. It will be
Okay.
pure Starship, and it will be a circumlunar mission, which once the Starship is fueled up from the fuel depot, which will have to be established and involve a number of Starship flights, just to supply fuel. But once we light the engines, we'll go on a figure 8 circumlunar trajectory, which will take about 3 days each way. And if you can think of a figure 8 beginning with your right hand, going around the leading edge of the moon, and then having a closest approach to the surface, about 125 miles, which will be just fantastic to see the moon, with our own eyes that close, and then emerge from the far side of the moon and see Earth rise. And at 240,000 miles, would be roughly 1,000 times higher than the mission I had 20 years ago, which was about 240 miles above the Earth. But Earth will appear by holding my pinky out at arm's length, and I have small hands. The Earth will be the size of my fingernail on my pinky. It'll be a pale blue dot. And it will just be, as I like to describe, out of this world, literally.
Yeah, another question for you about that flight profile. Is there any part and I'll extend this to both of you, any particular part of the flight that you are both looking most forward to, the launch, returning to Earth, or some site you're going to see along the way? What's the most exciting part of that flight for both of you?
Hey, why don't you answer?
Well, I mean, the launch must be most exciting time, I think. And, like, I don't know what kind of G I'm going to feel. And of course, I want to experience the 0G, right? And how can I flow in the air, and what could I see from the Starship? And I mean, the whole experience, and coming back, I think it's more feel G. So, to me, like, I never been to the space yet, right? Dennis did, but I never been. So the whole thing, I'm just so excited about the experience, and what kind of food can I eat at the space, and what kind of physical condition I'm going to get, and coming back, how I feel. And, I want to contribute to medical research as well. So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know, Chris, we wanted to ask about this. Any talk of science on board for this flight that either you or the other people that will be joining you on this flight, because I believe there are 10 other seats that are going to be filled by different customers on this flight. Any talks as to any science capabilities while you're making a flight around the moon?
Well, my guess is there will. I have no idea, other than us being very carefully monitored, and particularly myself, given my age, should contribute a lot to medical knowledge, and we will need that once we're ready to send Starship to Mars with as many as 100 people could be a 9-month flight. You need to really understand the physiology, particularly of a whole wide range of ages. So we hope to contribute to that.
And sort of to that end, to you both, I'm curious, there's still obviously a few years before this flight would take place based on the development and, as you were saying, proving out Starship and proving out the entire flight envelope. To both of you, have you considered, how uh, at what age would I not be comfortable personally going, or is that not really a factor for you? Are you both like, yeah, if medically they say we're good, we're going regardless of what the physical age on paper is?
Well, there was that question 21 years ago. NASA was very concerned about my age. I ended up being the third oldest person at that time to actually fly in space. And I was the 415th person. So I had that age question raised then. And I was put through a lot of medical tests. And then it came to now this mission. That's even a bigger issue because I'm 82 years old now and not 60. But the difference is I've been working out a lot, particularly with weights. So I'm actually a competitive weightlifter, and I have 4 American records in powerlifting. So I think I'm in better shape now than I was 21 years ago, and I'm going to maintain that. And if the fickle finger of fate impacts me, well, that's life in the big city. But I'm assuming that I'm going to keep in shape, and I'm going to stay around as long as I can until this Starship is ready. And you might want to comment on that.
So, I don't have any limitation or anything at this point at all. So 5 years, like 10 years, I mean, I don't know, but like I'm working out like Dennis does, and I actually wanted to go to a physique contest last week, and I couldn't do it because of this, but I'm trying to be in a shape and eat right, and it's just a lifestyle. So I want to keep in a good shape all the time, and inside and out, right? So mentally as well. So I don't have that issue at all at this point.
Awesome. And one final one for you both. I know you said like you bought the first 2 seats and that others are available, and we talked a little bit about the sort of airline model that anyone can buy a ticket, but I'm curious, because you two are the first and because these are sort of still test missions, so to speak, do you all get a say in who the other 8 people are, and to what extent would you?
We would welcome anyone. They have to be vetted by SpaceX, and I have complete trust that they will not invite any axe murderers or anyone like that to join the mission.
Ooh, a horror film shot in space. Now there's
Oh,
an
there you
idea,
go.
right? Like,
I feel the same. Anybody's welcome, and this announcement will help to find the people who is really, really willing to do this together. So I am so looking forward to, meet other people.
There's no question that anyone that joins this mission is going to have as much enthusiasm as we have.
And I think that's part of it too, right? Definitely not just the flying element, but like you were saying, the science element of helping us understand, how different bodies react to those environments, the different G-forces, but also sharing it with the world and sharing what these experiences are becoming, especially with a vehicle that could be as revolutionary, both for what it can do, but also the space inside, and no longer all those cramped quarters, like you experienced, Dennis, right, with the Soyuz, a very different era that we're in, and bringing that and sharing that, definitely a key part of how we start to move forward here. So thank you both so much, and we look forward to talking with you more as you start training for the mission as it comes up. Thank you both
Yeah.
so much.
We'll be
Thank you
happy
for
to
having
do that
us.
again. Yes.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We look forward to continuing to follow the development of this mission and Starship overall. And thank you all so much for watching. Akiko and Dennis, one more thank you to joining us and taking the time this afternoon. And we'll look forward to talking to you hopefully more down the line. But that's going to do it for our quick special episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. And we will see you all next time. Stay tuned for more NSF coverage of the Starship mission.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Toggling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight downside SCE off. Say again, SCE off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.